"You lost, old man." The group surrounded him, laughing, mocking. He didn't reply, just sat on the bench near the vending machine sipping from a dented thermos. They pushed. He didn't move. Then one of them stepped closer, rolled up his sleeve, and froze. The laughter stopped, because on the old man's arm was a tattoo no one dared question. Comment, "Respect the ink," if this already hit hard. He didn't go there to be noticed, just to rest his bones. Richard Rick Halstead, 76, had been driving since dawn, 14 hours straight, stopping only for gas and black coffee. His rusted F-150 had carried him from Tennessee westward, each mile marked by the quiet ticking of an engine that, like its owner, refused to quit despite its age. The rest stop appeared like a mirage off I-40, a concrete island amid the endless New Mexico desert. Mid-afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, the air so still it seemed to hold its breath. Heat waves danced across the empty parking lot. Rick pulled in slowly, parking his truck in the shade of a stunted cottonwood. His joints protested as he climbed down from the cab, the legacy of decades spent in jungle humidity, followed by mountain cold. He grabbed his battered green thermos, a companion older than most cars on the road, and made his way to a bench beneath a metal awning. He wore nothing remarkable, faded Levi's worn thin at the knees, a plain button-up with sleeves rolled to the elbows despite the heat, and cargo boots that had seen too many miles to count. His green canvas cap bore no visible insignia, its original color bleached to a softer shade by years of sun. No one gave him a second look. There was hardly anyone to notice anyway, just a family loading back into their minivan, a trucker walking his dog near the edge of the property, a middle-aged woman sorting through a map at a picnic table. Rick sat quietly, unscrewed his thermos, and poured steaming coffee into the cap. The steam rose in thin wisps that evaporated instantly in the dry air. His eyes, shadowed beneath the brim of his cap, surveyed the landscape with the careful scan of a man who had learned the hard way never to be surprised. The quiet lasted exactly 17 minutes. A lifted black SUV with oversized tires and tinted windows roared into the parking lot, hip-hop bass thundering through closed windows. It screeched to a stop across 3 spaces, and 5 20-somethings piled out laughing, pushing each other, radiating the particular energy of those who believe volume equals importance. They headed toward the vending machines just 10 feet from Rick's bench. One of them, a muscular young man in a sleeveless shirt revealing elaborate sleeve tattoos, glanced over. "Hey, Gramps, you camping or living here?" Another joined in, a tall blonde with designer sunglasses. "He looks like he's been parked since Vietnam." Rick didn't respond, didn't even look up, just took another slow sip from his thermos cap. The leader of the group, taller than the others, with the confident swagger of someone who had never been told no, smirked and walked closer. "What you got in the thermos, old man secrets?" Still no answer. "Hey, don't ignore us. Ain't this public property?" They gathered around the bench, their shadows falling across Rick like storm clouds. Rick calmly took another sip. One of them offered a mocking salute. "Sir, yes, sir," the leader scoffed. "Bet he never even served. Probably just wears that hat for discounts at Denny's." That's when Rick slowly set down his thermos and rolled up his sleeve. They mocked his silence, until one mark changed their volume. The tattoo on his forearm wasn't elaborate by modern standards. No color, no photorealistic shading, just black ink faded to the blue-gray that only decades can produce. An eagle clutching a serpent, both wrapped in barbed wire, inked with the precision of military efficiency rather than artistic flair. Beneath it, by simple letters, Mac V Sog, the leader blinked, cocky smile faltering. That real? Rick looked him straight in the eye for the first time. "You tell me." The intensity in that gaze, steady, unflinching, accustomed to staring down far worse than parking lot bullies, answered before words could. One of the others, a lanky young man with a patchy beard, whispered, "Wait, that's like CIA stuff, right?" "Special forces," another murmured, recognition dawning. "Vietnam, the black ops guys." The leader took a half-step back, attitude evaporating like morning dew in desert heat. "Special ops, Vietnam, top secret shit." "I heard those dudes went on suicide missions," said the youngest of the group, voice hushed with sudden respect. "My uncle has a book about them. Said most never came back." Rick didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tattoo spoke volumes, each faded line, a sentence, each scar that interrupted it, a paragraph of history no textbook fully captured. The laughter had vanished, replaced by the uncomfortable silence of people suddenly aware they had been dancing on sacred ground. The leader cleared his throat. Guys, back off. But we were just messing. I said back off. The command carried no room for debate. The group fell silent, shuffling awkwardly, eyes anywhere but on Rick's steady gaze or the marking on his arm. Rick stood up, a deliberate movement, unhurried yet fluid despite his age. His posture straightened, automatically muscle memory from a lifetime of standing at attention. At his full height, something about him shifted, as if the quiet old man had momentarily stepped aside to reveal the soldier who had always been there, hidden in plain sight. "Don't judge the quiet ones," he said, voice low but carrying. "We're just resting from a longer war." There was no anger in his tone, no lecture, no self-righteousness. Just the simple truth delivered by someone who had earned the right to speak it. The group stepped aside, creating a path without being told. One of them, the youngest, nodded in apology, a gesture of genuine remorse. Rick nodded back, acknowledgement, not absolution. There was nothing to forgive, just something to learn. He rolled his sleeve back down with the same methodical care he applied to everything. The tattoo disappeared from view, but its presence remained an invisible force field that had transformed mockery into muted respect in the space of a heartbeat. The leader watched Rick, something shifting behind his eyes, recognition perhaps of a strength that had nothing to do with muscle and everything to do with endurance. I had to pause here. One symbol, one memory, and a whole crowd remembered what they forgot. If this spoke to you, comment "The ink speaks" and let that silence echo. The one who mocked was the first to salute. As Rick gathered his thermos and started toward his truck, the leader of the group followed, separating himself from his friends with purpose in his stride. "Sir, he said, voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. "I didn't know." Rick paused, turned to halfway. "Most don't. My dad served. Iraq, 2nd Infantry Division. I saw a patch once, same eagle." Rick nodded, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Then maybe he didn't tell you everything." "None of us did." The young man shifted his weight, suddenly looking younger than his years. "Can I ask, what did you do?" Rick turned fully to face him, considering the question for a long moment. In that silence lived operations that remain classified 50 years later. Missions with no names, only code numbers. Brothers lost in jungles whose bodies were never recovered. "Enough to earn the ink," he finally said, "and enough to keep it quiet." The young man stood awkwardly, searching for words adequate to bridge the gulf between his world and the one etched into Rick's skin. Finally, with surprising sincerity, "Thank you, sir, for whatever that means now." Rick's weathered face softened slightly. "It means you know when to stop pushing. That's more than most." The others watched from a cautious distance, their earlier bravado replaced by something approaching reverence. One of them, the one with the patchy beard, who had recognized the significance of the tattoo, walked over hesitantly, holding out a cold bottle of water from the vending machine. "On us, sir, for the road." Rick took it with a nod of acknowledgement, the exchange simple but weighted with unspoken understanding. "Keep your noise," he said, "but carry respect." The young men nodded, suddenly students rather than tormentors. Rick returned to his truck without fanfare, climbed in with the careful movements of a man accustomed to working around old injuries. The engine started on the first try, loyal like its owner. He pulled away without music, without smoke, without any dramatic farewell. Just the quiet rumble of tires on asphalt and the dust trail that followed. The group stood watching until the truck disappeared around the bend, as if bearing witness to the departure of something more significant than a stranger. "Dude," the youngest finally said, "do you know what Mac of Sog even was?" The leader nodded slowly. "My dad mentioned them once. Said they were the guys other special forces talked about in whispers. Went where no one was supposed to go. Did what couldn't be done. And we were giving him shit about his thermos." Another muttered, shame evident in his voice. They returned to their SUV, subdued the encounter, having shifted something fundamental in their collective energy. The music, when they turned it on, was noticeably lower. Their laughter, when it eventually returned, carried less edge. As they pulled back onto the interstate, the leader glanced in his rearview mirror at the now empty rest stop growing smaller in the distance. "You know," he said quietly, "my dad never talks about Iraq, like never. I used to think he was being dramatic or something. The others waited, sensing he wasn't finished. I think I get it now, he continued. Some things you don't talk about. Not because you're afraid to remember, but because civilians wouldn't understand anyway. No one disagreed. The tattoo faded with time, but its meaning stayed sharp. 3 months later, the leader, whose name was Jason, posted about the encounter online. No photos, just words, honest and unfiltered. Caption, "We laughed at him, then we saw the tattoo." It went viral overnight. Veterans commented in droves, a digital gathering of those who recognized the significance without explanation. Mac of Sog, respect. You met a ghost who never wanted to haunt. Those men went where angels feared to tread, and the devil himself stood aside. Thousands shared it. Millions read it. History teachers used it in classrooms to discuss Vietnam beyond the textbook pages. Jason ended his post with, "We never got his name, but we'll never forget what we saw or how we felt after." At that rest stop off I-40, something changed. Perhaps it was coincidence, perhaps something more. But 6 weeks after Rick Halstead's visit, a small brass plaque appeared on the bench where he had sat. No official installation, no ceremony, just 4 simple lines. For the ones who sat in silence and still spoke the loudest. Their ink tells stories no book could contain. No one claimed responsibility for placing it. No maintenance worker removed it. Like the old soldier who inspired it, it simply remained quiet, unassuming, yet impossible to ignore once you knew to look for it. Subscribe to Wounds and Honor if you believe some ink isn't decoration, it's history.